Check podcasts.
The Bread and Butter Collective is a collection of hospitality professionals working together to help strengthen our industry to build strong culture, community, and sustainability.
I'm Calen McNeil.
And I'm Sam Jones. And this is the Bread and Butter Podcast.
Welcome to the Bread and Butter Podcast. How are you, Sam?
Calen, I'm great. How are you doing today?
Good. This is our wrap-up episode for Season 3 of the Bread and Butter Podcast.
I can't wait for Season 4 to start.
Well, and maybe we'll have 4 listeners at the end of it.
Wow, wouldn't that be neat? One listener for every season. That's growth, right? We can check with the producer and see if that's real growth or not.
Exactly.
See if we're into the advertising attraction yet.
Exactly.
See if anyone's beating down our doors.
So how are you? How was, the last week been? And
really good. I mean, there's been some real changes in my business. I lost a key player in my business this last week, and this week is going to be my first week without that key player, and I'm really looking forward to the challenge and what that's going to bring to me.
Feeling the fear and doing it anyways.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can.
So you didn't replace. So you just eliminated that position.
Yeah. Which I mean, eventually I'll replace that position, but I'm going to really lead up to that point, and I'm going to try to
kind of grow a little bit better or a little bit more.
Yeah, it gives me a chance to reflect on what I really want and the direction I need to go. We did a podcast with Frank not long ago, and he really got me thinking about a couple of things. And one of the things is core values, and not that we talked specifically about core values, but core values in general are really the guiding principle of your business. And as much as I know that, and I've spent oodles of time writing them down, it's time to reflect on those and to move.
See how your business is aligned with that.
Yeah, and try to. It's a good opportunity right now to not restructure, but reframe my approach to my business so it more follows my core values. Not that I'm far away from them, but to really feel them and understand them and to live by them in your business is great. And I really feel like I've got this golden opportunity to do that.
Well, I think it's a good point, and we talked about it on the Frank episode too, about planning and not being so rigid in your planning, and being more adaptable. And I think once you set up, and I think that's probably one of my weaker points is once I set up a structure, I kind of I really want to see it through, and I may hang on to that structure a little bit longer than would be beneficial. And it goes the old adage, hire slow, fire quick.
Yes. So
making those changes quicker. And we were in a similar boat where we've lost a long-term employee who was, incremental in our business at the beginning. And then both the business and everybody just outgrew each other a bit.
Right.
And the idea that, we don't need that position anymore, or rethink how that position, is needed, or if it's needed, or, who can kind of fill in the gap. And I think I probably should have or could have done that maybe a couple of years earlier, for everybody's benefit. But, not being so rigid, I think is the key.
Well, when you're making your business plans and you have a 1 and a 3 and a 5 and a 10-year goal, I mean, those 10-year and the 5-year even, those are just targets, really, right? I mean, there's no real expectation that you're going to hit a 10-year goal in our kind of business.
Maybe, you got to hit it, man.
And if you don't, you're screwed, right? But you look back at your 5, 3, and 1 year, I don't know about you, but I changed how I frame them. I think of my 10-year as just a plan. It's way the hell out there, and it can change anytime I want it to. It's just the direction that I want the company to go in.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe the 3-year and the 1-year plan, those have real targets attached to them, because those are things that we can work on a day-to-day basis towards. And those 1 and 3-year plans lead to your 5 and 10-year
That's right.
stretch goals, right?
When I think those, the constant reflection of like where you are in the moment in the 1 year plan, how is that leading you to the 3 year plan? And then, periodically, and I think I said on the episode that you should reflect on these things every 2 to 3 years, which I think you should be looking at your entire plans, quarterly for sure, and looking at how on track with your 1 year plan are you, and what does that lead into the 3 year plan, and then is it still relevant to your 5 and 7 year or 10 year plans, and how do they intersect? And then every 3 years, just redoing them all, using them as a base, but then just redirecting the ship.
And who do you talk to about changing those big plans? I mean, you've got partners, so your partners are obviously involved in that, but do you involve more of your team?
We have a senior leadership team, so they'll all have inputs. And because we follow the traction sort of philosophy on business management, those goals, are easily identifiable because we have these little rocks, and once they get completed, they're done. But then you've got longer term rocks, and they kind of dovetail into basically a mini plan,
right? Because
you're always looking at it weekly, and then keeping the traction moving forward. And then I reflect on it. A lot of the times it comes up when, there's funding requirements or needs. If we're coming up, we want to do a renovation at Cook Street Village. We also have some technological things we want to change with our POS system and integration, and just stuff as technology changes and partners that you've partnered with before can't keep up.
Right.
You've got to make those shifts, but it takes investment. So you don't always have the cash flow to match that investment. So I got to do a business plan and approach the business development bank, which is a great partner for businesses like ours, to help with cash flow and, capital stuff, because, when you're on thin margins, it's hard to put away enough money to do the capital improvements. I mean,
it is.
Big Wheel's been around, we're in our 12th year, and it's kind of like, we didn't put the money away for the rainy day because we've always just been growing, but Cook Street's been around 11 plus years now, so we got to do a bit of a reface.
Was that your first?
That was our very first one. Yeah,
it was. Eh?
Yeah, and when you build it, and this is a prime example of adaptability in business planning. So you build it. You're like, originally when we thought of where the kitchen was going to be, all this, we were like, oh, let's do it this way. And then we're sitting in the atrium, and a GFS, Gordon Food Service chef consultant, walked by and just looked at what we were doing and came in and said, no, you got to do this, this, and this. And he explained why. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's so obvious. Right? So we do that, but then the end product 10 years from now, relative to our new builds that we've done and new learnings and the systems, is still back in the old model, which impacts build times, impacts quality of work conditions for our staff. It's hot in there. It's tight. We need more bodies just because you can't move. So we're just, blew up the idea around that, and then figured out how can we make that more, bring it into the 2020s as far as, other kitchens go, so that they're more mirrors, advanced technologies as far as, workflows, but then also what kind of new equipment we can put in there to help our team produce better and also make the job funner,
Well, maybe not so hot.
And not so hot, just work conditions, right? So yeah, we're doing that in January. So now I'm redoing our entire business plan, there's an operational plan, which is just, okay, here's what we're going to do right now, and here's what we need funding for. And then you roll it into the bigger business plan, and then what does that look like? And then what does our next 2, 3, 5 years look like, and does it line up? And, it's a really good opportunity to do it. And I don't think you should be doing it every year, but you should probably do it every 3 years. But just change and monitor your 1 year to 3 year plan, like continuously, quarterly, I would probably say. And then, but consult the people that it impacts.
Right. Now, when you opened your first Big Wheel Burger with all of your partners in it, did you have a plan to open multiple locations at that point?
Yeah.
And if so, how detailed was that plan? Did you have a number by a certain amount of years that you wanted to hit?
Yeah.
And have you hit that target?
Well, it's
does it matter? It doesn't matter if you hit the target. Sorry.
Yeah. My quick answer would be no, it doesn't matter if you hit the target. Because as long as you understand the reasons why you didn't hit the target,
Right.
and or updated your plan to show what the real reality is now. Like, it's one thing to do a business plan. Like, I still have the original document business plan that we did, what I did for the bank when we first started opening Big Bill. So it has it all down. Like, you can actually see it, and it's got the financials and the forecasts and all that kind of stuff. And you'd be shocked at how accurate it was. I was shocked.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, see, this is original. But then you dive deeper and you're like, okay, well, you said you're going to have X many units at this time or stores, and you're not there. And you thought you'd have 2 stores after 3 years, but it took you 5 years. And, so on and so forth. There's all these little differences, right?
Sure.
And then I redid our business plan. When did I do that? I guess it was pre-COVID. And then I sort of like changed it so that it would more reflected. But then I look back at that now, and obviously COVID hit.
Yeah.
So, I thought we were going to do 4 in the last 4 years or 3 years, and we did 1, which is I guess 2, including the food trailer. So now I'm going to be redoing the entire plan with more realistic. But the thing that's changed is the desire to grow. Like, I have no desire to be a McDonald's or any of that kind of stuff, because part of it is like, well, what does the business do for you, and what do I need from the business? And then, what do I want in the future? And I'd rather build, successful, single unit stores that are run well and are profitable, and that, my staff and my managers can live and just build that sort of community, which gets lost if you start just going out there and just going, okay, let's do multiple stores. Right. And it's also expensive. And then it's like, well, that means I have to work harder, but then everything takes away from something. So I'd rather spend my time doing some of the community stuff that I get a lot of joy out of. And then the business stuff is more ego driven, I guess, because you're, I said we were going to do 10 stores or whatever, and I did it. And tick,
mark them off your list, and
But I've never been a real, ticker of boxes. So
I'm the worst ticker of boxes. I don't even like making the checklist myself. But
I like the idea of the process of doing a business plan and then just seeing, how on track or not you are. But the reality of business is things change, and you talk about rigidity, or I talked about rigidity earlier, and when you're too rigid on your numbers, there's an impact. Because the reality is what should drive your business plan. Like, what does the customer always want? Like, what are the sales are like? What products do they need? How are my staff reacting? What's the overall morale of our stores and culture? Does it align with what I want to run as a business?
Right.
That should drive and make changes to your business plan, because the business plan is just numbers and words.
It is. I think
in a point of time.
I think for the vast majority of my career, I didn't have a plan. It was definitely day to day, like see where I'm going to end up at the end of the week. Probably 7 years ago, I really knuckled down and came up with my first business plan, and it was great. It really gave me a sense of direction and a sense of purpose in my business, and it gave me something to do.
Yeah.
Right? Not that I didn't have anything to do. I felt like I had everything to do because I was so unfocused.
Yeah.
But a business plan really gives you something focused to do, because now you know where you're going.
Yeah.
And as long as you have the ability to change it. I know when right before COVID, my business plan was actually so on target. It was ridiculous how on target it was, without really trying too hard.
Yeah.
And then COVID came, and I redid my whole business plan. I sat down in my office. I had the whole floor to myself because no one was around. Felt like a ghost town.
Yeah.
And I sat up there kind of, sad and lonely, and started redoing my business plan to make it more true to what was going on,
more
make
relevant.
it more reflective.
Yeah.
And now I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, what a great opportunity today to start reviewing and rethinking my business plan, because times have changed again.
Well, and I think the time, like that time window, like if for our audience sake, if you guys are like the most humorous in all the good ways episode was your origin story, and where you came from, where you are, and then
Are you
just
talking
that
about
journey.
my 7 years at Camosun?
Yeah. It
I
was so
figured.
funny. So check through our history of our podcast and kind of revisit that one because it's very, very good. But the idea of you've ran your business successfully for that many years without much planning other than just off the side of your desk planning. It was awesome. But I do think that, your time window for, you did it, when COVID hit, and now you're looking to revisit it, which is good because your business has changed a lot. I mean,
really
you
has.
bought a new property, you closed down one of your stores, like you shifted partnership buyouts and all of that stuff, which is, those are like teethy, meaty changes that if you looked at your business plan wouldn't be reflected in anywhere.
No.
So, creating a new business plan where, okay, this is the reality of today. These are the learnings I've had. Here's some of the big ideas. Here's some of the small ideas. And here's where I want to see our business go moving forward it's a perfect time to do it. And, it creates a little bit of a checklist of priorities, right? And I think that's where you get the focus down. And then as you do and implement and have some successes, I think then that kind of will, allow you to kind of forecast better, and also communicate to your staff because you've got a team and you can't, implement your goals without the support of the team.
Right.
But if they don't see what your vision is, what the end goal is, then they're going to be as scattered as you.
Right.
If you don't have a plan, right?
And right now, because I always have a plan posted on my wall somewhere for everyone to see. It's my 3, 5, 10.
Yeah.
And I passed it the other day, and I was like, oh, wow, that was thinking about the world in a different way that I view the world now. And as the world turns quicker and quicker, it seems, my ideas about my position in the world and where I want to be in the world changes. And so my business plan needs to reflect that.
Yeah.
And it will. And it's always a good opportunity to look ahead and forecast your future. Even thinking about it is a good exercise.
Well, I think everybody as individuals do it in their life. And, I think the thing that humans probably don't do enough of is actually making healthy changes to their life, and I'm just talking, they don't have a plan.
Right.
So they don't have a financial plan. They don't have a life goal plan. Some do, but that's no different than business. It's even more critical in the business to have a plan because there's so many other people that are affected by it. Customers, staff, vendors, all that stuff are all, it's like a heartbeat in an organism that if you don't have a plan, then fast forward 5 years, you could have the best business ideas and the best product, but you will never know how it's eroding or how the customers are perceiving it or the times are changing. And if you're not adapting, and personally, it's the same thing.
Well,
right?
Personally, that's totally true. Like I look at my parents, my dad in particular, and I'm like, wow, when I'm his age, what I want for me is I want to be able to walk strongly and think clearly and be happy and healthy. I want to be able to walk up a hill without being winded.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you do that? If that's your plan, well, you've got to start doing something about it now. It's too late to do it the day before and go, oh, I should go buy some trainers or something. It's like, that's how I'll do it. By then, it's too late. You've got to really be thinking ahead with a goal in mind. And that goal, like we've been saying, can change, and it should change because you as a person are changing as you navigate through life, and what's important to you changes. But if I want to be happy and healthy when I'm old, I got to start exercising my happiness and my healthiness now.
Totally. And it's even understanding what home you want to be in as you age.
Right.
A great example in my life was my father who had a stroke. And after the stroke, he bought land in Kitwanga, which is in northern BC.
Okay.
It's about 45 minutes from Terrace, BC, and about an hour and 15 from Smithers. And in the middle of nowhere. So beautiful, like amazing place to be. But it is in the middle of nowhere. So prior to his stroke, he had to plan. He bought the land. He was building. After the stroke, he actually designed the house. So here's a guy who was paralyzed on one side of his body. Obviously affected his mental, abilities as well, because strokes, give you a brain injury. He builds a 3-story house, and he literally is physically challenged as a result of the stroke. And he did this, and his wife was there planning it all. And then I remember going, and I didn't see any of the planning until I actually went up and the house was built. And I'm like, Dad, you just built a 3-story house that has like 40 stairs from the bottom to the top where your bedroom is.
Where's the elevator?
Yeah, where the elevator, where like the planning is like, and then he's literally living there for 4 or 5 years, and he's just like, okay, he's got to sell it because it's just totally not functional. And there's a prime example of poor planning, but also not recognizing the change of the environment. Like his environment changed, but his planning and his idea of what he wanted didn't. And I think that is a really good lesson for businesses to understand, is when, the world changes around you, you better change with it. Otherwise your day is gone as far as, your ability to be successful, in a large way. And, pandemic was a very good recent example for a lot of businesses where overnight the business was gone. And it's like, well, how do we rethink how we get it back? And, what does it mean for us as a business? And then also, how did all of the history before, like operating on 2, 3, 4% margins, like barely keeping up with inflation, and where's your pocket of cash that you've got left over to deal with this new world that just got thrown on you? So it's all about preparing for, success, but also preparing for those challenging times. And the plan should have all of those things in it. Like it can't always be rose color, and then when you review it, be critical of the decision-making process that got you there. Right. Like my dad, like, oh yeah, I wanted to build this 3. Sure. If you're happy to, but even then it doesn't make sense to be doing that. I think he was 43 when he had a stroke, or no, 47 when he had a stroke. It's like, okay, well, the next 10, or if you want to be there for 20 years, and even when I recently bought a house with my wife, and before we were married. See, I can talk about that. Yeah. We recently were married. So we bought a house, and I was like, okay, we're going to renovate it. We're going to do this stuff. And it's like, I'm not thinking about my body and my physical abilities today. I'm like, okay, if this is our forever home, I'm probably going to need a wheelchair at some point. So
have you got one with a ramp?
Well, we're going to redesign and rebuild, but the process of that planning is like, okay, it's more rancher style.
Yeah.
It's got grade level entrances. It doesn't have a bunch of stairs. Perhaps you look at an elevator, and doing that investment now. But more importantly, the other thing you do is you make it more environmentally friendly, less environmental impact. Because that is the house, if you need to sell it, that's the house that you're going to be competing against in the future. So it's, even when it comes to your business, is like, okay, well, what is this business who is my competition 5 years from now going to be? And what do I need to be prepared to compete at that level as well? And, you need to be touching on those types of things in your planning process too, so that you are ready. And then if you're building some of those little things, I view it as small changes. Years ago, you talk about New Year's resolutions. I changed that name to affirmations.
Right.
So rather than resolving myself to do something, I would affirm to either do something or not do something. So for example, I took out sugar from my coffee, and then the next year I took out cream, and then the next year I took out butter from the popcorn that I was eating at movies, because I like to go to movies, and then I would take off the candy. And then I just saw little transformations in my weight and my, just little stuff. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like, oh, go run. I had some of that stuff too, like exercise, 20 times in the year or whatever. And then, try to achieve that. But it wasn't like, oh, I got to do all this unrealistic stuff that is just, in a perfect world, may happen, but most likely based on your patterns and your habits will never happen.
Well,
so why plan that way?
It's hard to go against the grain of who you actually are, and it's about happiness.
Work with yourself, right? Understand what you enjoy, and then just if making a small change like taking out sugar or cream from your coffee impacts you in a health way, and then you add, a walk a week or a walk every couple weeks, and then those habits build on each other, because now all of a sudden you've taken the pressure away. Like
Right.
it's not like, oh, I want to sell 1 million widgets. Well, how are you going to sell 1 million widgets from your basement? Like, so that plan's not going to work. So building a plan that's not realistic is as bad as not having a plan,
Right.
really, because then it's not tied to reality, and then how do you make the plan more real if you're delusional on what you need to be focusing on, right?
So your plan needs to be fairly realistic.
Yes.
Not unattainable, but a stretch nonetheless.
Well, how
Otherwise,
good
you're
is
not
it?
challenging
Totally.
yourself.
But I mean, you
right?
have to challenge yourself. You got to set, reasonably ambitious goals, but you then have to back it up with the right plan that supports those like you can make a plan that like, I want to do this, but guess what? You better be working 67 hours a week, because that's what it's going to take to achieve that, or surround yourself with other people that are going to be working 67 hours a week so that
Right.
that can be achieved. It's possible.
And the vast majority of us aren't capable of doing the huge stretch. Like if you want to sell 1 million whatever
Yeah.
is in a year, well, I mean that's an unrealistic goal. So so your targets for that are 20,000 in the first month, and then that's unrealistic too. So right away you're starting off with setting yourself goals that are unattainable, and as soon as you don't hit your first goal,
Yeah, it's defeating.
It's defeating, and
Yeah.
defeats all the rest of your goals.
Yeah,
down
and then
the
you
line,
just
right?
like, oh, I don't even want to look at the plan because it's a reminder of how bad I'm doing or how off
Right.
track I'm doing.
But if you're doing stuff like going for one walk a week and taking sugar out of your coffee, all of a sudden those are two very small things that can be done,
Yeah,
measured,
realistic.
and
Yeah.
you're going to feel better naturally, which gives you the ability to make other good choices. Because once you start
Totally.
making choices that work for you, it's really hard to start making choices that don't work for you, because it sets a pattern, right?
Well, and it brings you like the setbacks feel bigger. So if you're doing stuff, another example, what I found in my own personal life, I've always been battling weight, and when I was super active when I was younger, I was able to just burn off calories and do stuff, and I'm consuming as much and drinking and doing all this kind of behaviors, but I would always be on this yo-yo with my weight. And it wasn't until I made like a kind of permanent change, and it wasn't like I started a keto diet, which isn't easy to do, for long periods of time, but it kind of reset my body
Right.
to where I was like, okay, I went from 275, almost 280 to like 205, 210.
Oh, wow.
And, that was over a 6-month period. And normally, because I've done that in the past before with like different types of diets or whatever, it would just delay the inevitable of just getting back right up to that same weight. And then I would peak at a higher total. Right. And then kind of, okay, here I go again. The idea of making these big changes and then just seeing them eroded, I mean, it's depressing and it's not healthy. It's not on your body. So when I went to keto, I also did fasting. And I'm like, okay, well, one of these is going to work. And doing a combination, I was losing 12 pounds a month. Like super worked.
Wow.
But one wasn't totally sustainable, but there was aspects of it that I could keep. But the one thing I did keep that allowed me to, I peaked at like 255, or no, sorry, 245.
Okay.
And now I'm back down to like 225 again. Was the fasting component of it, where that really, because then I could eat in that window pretty much what I wanted, and it still kept my weight down. And so that was the one change that I kept. And now I haven't yo-yoed. I haven't got up, I haven't re-peaked. So I made a fundamental change and I found something that worked, but it wasn't that hard.
Right.
Like the first week or two of getting on the schedule of fasting, now I can regulate it where if I need to lose weight or I want to trim down, like maybe you're getting married or something and you want to fit your suit that you bought 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Which this is a true story.
And did that work out for you?
100%. And
Right.
so my fasting window went from 8 hours of eating to 5 hours to 4 hours of eating. Didn't impact, it actually improved my energy level because if you fast, you have a lot of energy.
I
is-
enjoy fasting.
To me, it's like the single thing that people can do, not that this is a diet show, but it's about making small changes and then keeping what works. So I eat kind of a keto-y, like a higher fat, like I eat way more avocados than I ever did, and olive oils, and butter I'm not afraid of, and fatty meat I'm not afraid of. I eat that, which I get a lot of energy from. So, but I also am not afraid of a pasta and other little things which give you the joy of life, like
They do give you joy, don't they? Flour is an amazing thing. I try to avoid it, but I mean, there's sometimes like a special occasion where you just need to
when you don't
want to
you don't want to be doing things that make you depressed or make you beat yourself up because you're not on the plan. And that's where designing a plan that is built challenges you, but then you build in enough stuff that is easy to do, that it's achievable and attainable. And then when the world changes around you, you just revamp what you're doing and make some adjustments. And it's not perfect. God, like I look back and sometimes I'm just like, what were we thinking when we thought that?
We are now an official podcast because we've talked about intermittent fasting.
Yeah,
I think we're gonna get all kinds of calls from Athletic Greens. They're start calling and
we want
to
sponsor. Yeah, exactly.
That's all we need to do was say keto and fasting.
If you look at us, we're like the total opposite of the visual of what people who are healthy, and I mean, sure.
I don't know. I've seen Tim Ferriss lately. He's not looking
as
healthy as he used to.
Exactly. Skin tone's off a little bit.
I know. A little jaundice. I think he needs to eat more.
But, again, obviously we talk about business and we talk about planning and all that. It can't be overemphasized enough. It's, you're only as good as your plan. Yeah. And I think that's true.
And you can only really manage what you measure, right?
Yeah.
And you can't manage or you can't measure what you don't plan.
No.
So if you don't have a plan, how are you measuring things except day to day, really?
Well, and you also need the right data, because I think, data is so important, like the information you're getting.
Right.
I had a conversation with somebody that is involved in buying businesses, and, the disparity between the ones that have data and the ones that don't. And when they approach businesses that don't have data, you see what the gap is in the business because they don't know how to measure and monitor what they're doing. Like they don't have, data on what product sells more. And then, what is the margin of that product based on your food costs? And, all that data is so important in our business because we're literally left with crumbs at the end of it. To try to, grow your business or pay people more or, go on a holiday yourself. So that is a very key component to the whole thing is the data.
In terms of operational efforts, how much data do you really need to operate your business efficiently? I'm not talking about what someone would come in and look at your books for a purchase. That's all the data. I'm sure it would help. But if you're a business owner who doesn't like data, but you want to build out a scorecard that you see on a weekly basis or a daily basis, and it's got 5 numbers on it, 5 to 7 numbers, what numbers would you put on your scorecard?
I think top line revenue is important because that's basically your budget. That sets your budget, like how much dollars you're actually bringing into the business. And then obviously your cost of goods, but how that translates into a single number is your gross profit. So, and that as a percentage is really important because a lot of people will look at the number, but that number adjusted for inflation or relative to the last year or the last 5 years, it's hard to really put it in context in a snapshot, but as a percentage. So if your bottom line ends up being, in a good year, you're at 10%, for example, profit. So look at your gross profit number, and if that's at 35%, that gets you a 10% net. Well, what would a 37% gross profit get you? Is it 12%? Is it 11%? Or is it 40% gross profit? Is that going to get you to 12 or 13%? Like, where does the erosion underneath, which is your operating costs, all your expenses, and how efficiently are you running that? But if, for me, it's gross profit is the most revenue, gross profit. Right. Obviously, if your costs of goods are in line, the gross profit is going to grow up. It's going to go up. Right. And then looking at where your best profit years were or are, and then what your gross profit was. So then I don't even worry about the net because obviously you do have to, if you have a good gross profit but a bad net,
Yeah.
the operating expenses is the issue, right? So how much rent you're paying, what is your insurance, what is your corporate labor, like your back office, your accounting bills, your legal bills, your overhead, your expenses, like all of those things in there need to dive into. But most businesses, that's kind of static. Like your rent, you review it when you update your lease. But understanding how those costs, like your rent shouldn't be more than 8% of your sales, like just little tiny things like that you can kind of garner to help manage. But so I do revenue, I do gross profit, and then I would do an analysis of the menu, like in the food business, like what dishes do I have that provides the biggest chunk of capital to my business? So what are the margins if one dish produces, sell it for $30, but it costs you $20 and it produces $10 to your operating bank.
Right.
But this other item you charge $30, but it costs you $10 to make. Now you got $20 to it. But you sell 5 of those, and you sell 5 of the high margin ones and 15 of the low margin ones. The 15 low margin ones produce more cash, right? So some people will be like, well, this is way higher margin. Well, how many do you sell of it? And then maybe if you lower the price a little bit, you'll sell more, which then instead of just doing take off the $10 margin one and get the $15 or $20 margin one, and maybe make it $16 margin, but you can sell 3, 4, 5 times as many. So now all of a sudden, same overhead, right? But now this item is selling and it's contributing more to your success because it's got a higher margin.
Yeah,
right?
Because your expense on that is down.
But as a chef, you might be going, oh, I'm tired of that product. Like we had this thing at Zambries where, Pete was tired of the pork shoulder. But our pork shoulder operating margin is like...
It's got to be way
crazy.
better than fish or beef.
Yeah, and then you got your beef, and you're like, okay, well, the beef is like $40, the pork shoulder is $35 or whatever. And both are like amazing dishes, like taste-wise. But he was like, oh, let's remove the pork shoulder. And I'm like, it's our second best seller for quantities, but our highest contributor for margin, right?
So if you take that away, you're skewing all your other numbers.
Totally. And now all of a sudden you go from, a profitable menu to, a break-even menu just by replacing one dish, for example.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, well, you better replace it with something that contributes that, or you adjust over here to improve your margin on what's left. But that's data. If you do not have or do not use, you're basically screwing yourself, right? And it's in your best interest as a business owner to be obviously, analyzing this the best, not just for your own personal benefit, but the benefit of your staff and your vendors and your ability to succeed in business. And,
Well, you can communicate more clearly your needs and your expectations when you understand the information. If you don't have a full grasp of your menu, then how do you talk intelligibly?
Totally. And I like
anybody.
I like that. I like that.
I'm glad we're making up words.
Yeah. Listen, I make up so many words. If you say it really quick, then people kind of at first go, oh, and they just move past it. But I think those are, these points are very, not only are they valid, they're essential to success. But it's not a completely, there's a whole bunch of other things that obviously impact your ability to be successful. But if you're looking at money and cash flow and your ability to pay your bills, and because the other thing is the balance sheet, right? A lot of people focus on the profit and loss and go, okay, we're profitable. But if they're spending their money on like capital goods, or like they're just constantly improving, they're painting their store every week, or they're building a new shelf, or they're buying new equipment or upgrading equipment or whatever, they can find themselves, even if they're in a profitable business, with no cash.
Yeah.
Right? Because that all sits on the balance sheet, which, creates some depth. Or if you're paying down your debt too quickly. So, a lot of people, I want to pay off my debt. It's like, well, if you own your house and you have a 30-year mortgage, but you pay it off in 10 years, you're going to be paying 3 times as much payment per month. So how does your cash flow? Is it more money than you're making in the month? Well, then your intentions are great, but you don't have enough cash to do it. So it's the exact same example with this is like, okay, well, we make $20,000 a month. Okay, well, are you spending $18,000 a month on new equipment and investing in your business or opening a new store or whatever? Well, that's going to drain your cash. So on one statement, you look, wow, this is amazing. And then, on the other, which is your balance sheet, if all the money's flowing to your balance sheet, then there's just no money left over for those rainy day funds, or if you get an emergent situation where your important piece of equipment dies and you have to invest in new equipment, or you need to make your payroll.
Yeah.
Something which is essential.
The every
right?
2-week emergency.
Yeah. Well, and even with the payrolls, how people get paid. Because if you pay people by check, it takes 5 to 7 days for all those checks to clear your bank, which gives you time to build the cash flow in your operating business. But if you do direct deposit, for example, and your payroll is 20,000, that all comes out of your bank 3 days before it gets paid to your employees. So you need to have that cash readily available. And as convenient as it is, and it is convenient, and it's better for the staff to get direct deposit.
Sure.
Not everybody has banking arrangements where they can actually get access to their cash. And that is a fundamental way people actually stay, I don't want to say poor, but, there's structural issues with banking and how money gets transferred. So making it as easy as possible for the employee is way better for your business and way better for the employee. But you need to have you got to have it. If your payroll is 100K, you have to have 100K in your bank 3 days before it needs to get actually paid.
Not 3 days after like it used to be.
Yeah.
That's a 6-day period of
Totally.
grace that you can make $100,000.
Yeah, exactly. It
Business,
covers
right?
your cash flow and all these things, right? So, having the higher margins make all of those good business decisions easier. But if you don't have it, you're going to be constantly struggling. And it's not necessarily that your business is bad. It's your cash management may not be great, or you're doing things that erode the cash by not recognizing why and how. Like businesses grow. And that's one thing. If you're in a fast growing business that is underfunded, your business volume could be going really well, but you're spending all that money in new growth, which then takes 2 or 3 years to get to the point, and you basically could bankrupt yourself by having the most successful business ever if you're just constantly reinvesting it without putting some aside and managing that cash flow component of it.
Right. So there's something to be said for defining what success is to your business. Is
Totally.
it rapid growth, and is success having multiple stores and a huge bank account?
Yeah.
Or is it slow growth, being really comfortable with what you have and not panicking, not worrying about things?
Well, and I think some businesses need more growth. I mean, there's competitive risks, especially if you're growing a location-based business, like getting the right location over your competition and, keeping your brand relevant. I think those are real arguments to kind of garner like a quicker growth sort of strategy. But you have to basically price your product in a way that can support that growth, or have deep pockets or deep, access to capital. Right. Because the capital is what will restrict your growth, but also will tie up a lot of money that will cloud, the real economic benefit of your business. Because, if you look in, other businesses that are high capital, like the oil business, for example, where you're investing in steel and all of the stuff and all the money's there, and you've got a banking relationship, and they say, oh, well, let's get you debt free in 3 to 4 years. Amazing. That sounds great. But that chews up it's so much cash that you're literally living hand to mouth while you're doing this. And at the end of it, you own like a whole bunch of steel, and you've got this debt-free business that hopefully has survived.
Yeah.
Right? Because you need capital to deal with the downturns. And if you just sink all the capital back in your business, like paying off your house, you don't have enough money left over for food, or for those emergencies, or to pay for your kids' college or whatever. And then you're going back and borrowing. So you're managing the amount of capital you're bringing in, and then what you're going to end up left over, just split that last, the positive cash flow component into parts. Okay, 10% I'm going to reinvest in the business, 10% I'm going to put in my pocket. And then, the other, I'm just going to, do something, a project with, or I'm going to invest in a new store or new equipment or whatever. But understanding how that cash gets generated.
The understanding makes me smile, because there was a time many years ago where I had no understanding of that. And I remember my first year in business, I didn't pay any taxes, didn't have any concept that I'm just a glorified tax collector, no idea. And I took all my paperwork to my accountant, some trashy accountant. And they said, here's your bottom line. I'm like, wicked, $100,000 or whatever it was.
Oh, and you owe $150K to government.
Where is it? They're like, what do you mean, where is it? It's gone and you owe.
Yeah.
Well, what?
That's exactly it.
And that's just not understanding. So understanding is all of those numbers and the ideas are so important.
Well, not being afraid to ask the questions too. Like even if you're, because I mean, going back to your origin story podcast, and even in my own situation too, where you're just like, how the hell? Like we've been generating millions of dollars of revenue, and how am I got nothing to show for it?
Yeah.
And like, where does it go? And a lot of people are kind of, I don't know, maybe embarrassed or just kind of like, oh man, I feel kind of, you have that, kind of feeling fake. Like, am I really a business person?
Mm-hmm.
But having a mentorship, and I think the Bread and Butter Collective is like a great example of, people coming together and kind of looking, okay, is this how you do it? This is how I do it. Like, what do you? But not being afraid to say, hey, am I doing this right? Like, or is this something? How are you doing it? Right?
Which is what the Bread and Butter Collective is for. I mean, that's why we're a collective. We have a collective of ideas, a collective of people who
collective of boneheaded strategies.
Yeah, you just can't know everything, but together as a collective, we can at least share those.
Well, and it makes you feel
ideas.
more confident moving forward. You don't have to know everything about everything, but how can you? And every group has people with strength. And sometimes if you're just a sole operator and you're in this business because of your passion and whatever, you don't have a strong business background, that you can buy a business background by hiring a business manager or an accountant, or get legal advice and things like that, so you can fill in those gaps. But if you just think, oh, I don't need to worry about that, you're probably going to find yourself in a bit of a pickle. But if you surround yourself with people that you're comfortable to talk to and share with, you'll just get a whole bunch of advice for free.
Yeah. Right.
And that advice, it's just like anything in life, what you put out there comes back. And a lot of times it comes back in droves, and it doesn't matter how good. I feel like I've got a good, strong business management. I've learned some creative stuff, but there's been ideas that have been, I've learned from the Bread and Butter Collective over the last 2-3 years that have just been, instrumental in how I move forward, and also confirming and reaffirming that, okay, yeah, I am on the right track.
Well, confidence through everyone's kind of shared experience is a really nice thing. I mean, when you hear people who are going through or have gone through the same things that you have, it gives you the confidence of not being alone.
Totally.
And not being so weird, like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one who didn't understand that.
Yeah.
It's like asking questions in class. I mean, there's no wrong.
No bad
questions, right? And it's the same thing with Bread and Butter Collective. And this is like our 3rd year.
I know.
Our meetings are starting up again now, which is a great plug. If this comes out within the next couple of weeks, we can plug our membership a little bit.
Yeah, and come and join and
come hear what we have to say.
Yeah, hear what we have to say. And our podcast, obviously, Big Wheel Burger sponsors our podcast.
Thank you, Big Wheel.
Which is fantastic, and we're happy to do it. But it's mostly about community building and sharing of ideas. So if somebody stumbles on our podcast, obviously, look through the library, because we've had, incredible guests on. We've had bankers on. We've had business leaders on. We've had, recently this past year, we've had Fatso Peanut Butter, Jill on, and talk about an origin story there. We've had city councilors running about their vision and, having just gone through a civic election, because all of those things and the stories around them are about our community and community building, which being plugged into that kind of stuff, I think makes us better business people. And also gives us a broader range of information that allows us to inform ourselves on how we're going to run our business moving forward.
Well, we're more conscious of other people's perspectives as well, right? And we need to share those perspectives with our groups.
And I think the other thing is, which gets lost in this age of social media, which I'm pretty confident, and everybody should read The Fourth Turning. So it's a book. It's an amazing book, and it actually talks about the understanding of this ebb and flow that just keeps repeating itself.
I keep talking about that book.
Keep
recommending it to people.
It's so interesting. And part of that whole thing is it doesn't happen on social media. It happens right now, face-to-face conversation. And, I think of Janice Williams, who came on our podcast, and she is more right than I am as far as, what I'd like in policies. But she was very interesting. She cared about the city. And it's important to remember that most people have, the city's best interest at heart. And they have different ways of getting there and different priorities, but you can eliminate a lot of the BS and the polarization by just actually sitting down and having a coffee, right? And
everyone changes when you're right in front of them, right?
Well, and they're not going to say stuff that is, and even if they have those dark views or whatever, or really kind of radical left views, I mean, everything happens in the middle. And ideas are shared, and then you can see how amenable they are to new information. But you miss all of that if you're just typing on a screen and you have the anonymity of online, and nothing good comes from that in my mind.
No, there's not. You've got no pushback, no frame of how far you're going, because you can't see it in the other person's eyes.
Yes.
How far you're taking this idea. Maybe it's too far to share with this individual, right?
Yeah.
Whereas online, there's no filter for that. There's no, oh my God, maybe I'm offending someone because they're averting their eyes, or they're not looking at me when I'm talking to them because they don't like what I'm saying, or whatever, right?
And even having, we had Krista Loughton on, and she's worked in the homeless community for a long time, and she's a documentary filmmaker by trade, but that's a vow of poverty for her. But online, I saw stuff about her being a grifter, and here's someone who's chosen to, I don't want to say a vow of poverty, but she's chosen a line of work that doesn't pay very well, but it has a lot of social benefit. And so, but you would never know that if you were just looking at your tribe speaking, if you were more leaning on the right, and you'd think, oh, Krista Loughton's a grifter, right? When in actual reality, she's basically, barely living below the poverty line. And what she's doing is she's doing it because she cares. You may not agree with her approach or the outcomes or whatever, but, don't say that she's that way. So it was nice to have her on and just hear her vision. And obviously I know her well. And then you've got Dave Thompson, who's an environmental lawyer and a little bit more pragmatic and more, systems and municipal good governance and things like that, but also has an idea that, we need to improve our housing situation, and you need to help people that are on the bottom rungs of our socioeconomic, platform. So how do you know about these people unless you're in conversation with them? And don't just take what you see or read, do some investigation and find there's a ton of material on all these people, and just having the ability to go for a coffee with them. It's great.
You know that Mr. Carmack, one of our past guests, is up for the Order of Canada. Speaking of fabulous guests that we've had on who are
that was
a really big part of the fabric of our community.
Oh my God.
And he's a national, global part of our community.
When it was so funny because that's Mary, our president of Bread and Butter Collective's father.
Yeah.
And then she mentioned, you should have my dad on. And we're like, yeah, let's have her dad on. And then who's your dad? And it's like, oh my God, here's this guy who's been, so instrumental in the environmental, kind of stewardship. And information,
this cultural, scientific, environmental.
Yeah, that was an intro. That was one of our first ones in season 3.
I think that was maybe season 2.
Was it season 2? With the end of the season 2?
Maybe.
So that's in our library as well.
Yeah, and it was fabulous. And I think he's getting the Order of Canada in this next month.
Oh my! Yeah, that's incredible.
I know, right?
Yeah, that is I
You
love
can
it.
you can say you heard him here. Well, probably not first.
Not
if
first,
you,
but
at least
maybe.
you heard him here.
Yeah, have you heard him here? We have access to that, and there was a very good dialogue, and I think that's one of the pleasures I've got. Not only, I mean, obviously, I love talking to you each week and talking about what we like to talk about, and we can talk forever.
Forever. Good thing
Which
they
is kind
cut
of
us
so
off after
interesting.
3 or 4 hours here.
Well,
They,
we literally
they,
could just be, and they're like, guys, they're turning the lights off at the studio. Thanks for your words again.
They get Carol Burnett out front sweeping the studio floor. It's time to
Well,
go.
considering how little, and you talk about planning, how little planning goes into our podcast, and a lot of it I think that's what gives an organic sort of feel, but there's no dead air. Like, I don't feel like we ever don't have something to talk about or discuss.
Well, that just means I picked the right partner for this, doesn't it? You don't
You
leave a
and me
lot
both.
of dead air, brother. You don't leave a lot of dead air in the work room.
Oh,
it's pretty great.
Well, and this is, it's been awesome.
Yeah, wrapping up season 3 is being a real
What was your
pleasure.
highlight? Like,
of season 3 or
Yeah.
all around? You know what?
we can-
I think my highlight. I mean, I was gonna say kind of branching into broader community interviews, like talking to politicians or prospective politicians, people who have an idea of what their community wants to or how they want to see it, was really great for me. I'm gonna say though that it was talking or getting to hear Frank D'Ambrosia speak,
Yeah.
because as much as it's nice to hear what politicians want out of the world, I much preferred hearing Frank's perspective on what Victoria was, has been, coming into the present and moving into the future. I thought his vision of the future of Victoria is the one that I want to stand behind a little bit more than anybody else.
Totally.
And just hearing, just having someone so eloquently say what all that experience that he has, that knowledge that he has, and just like it was really inspiring to hear Frank talk.
Well, and it's kind of a good memory to, and this is where someone was saying about the new council, and the city's gonna just be burnt to the ground, and I'm just like, oh my God, we live in one of the best cities in the world, even today, with all of the the disparity between the rich and the poor, and all the issues we have, and I would rather focus on trying to lift people up but also not to bash a city that's amazing, and it's gone through some challenges like everybody has with COVID. Sure. And Frank just brings that perspective of the length of the world and how this moment in time is such a small part of that. Like, just it's not even a blink of an eye in where our city will be 100 years from now and 200 years from now, and all these components are small little bricks in the mix, but you lose sight of that if you're just constantly just hating on stuff. Like the bike lanes, is as much as it pained a lot of people to go through that process of the construction side and the delays and moving and the misunderstanding of who goes where and who's whatever. Seeing it kind of develop, and once it's like anything that changes, people adapt. And the idea with Frank, and obviously the importance of the people that run our city, from the civic level and the provincial level and the federal level, and all of those things matter. But then to hear Frank's perspective on the development side, where he is involved with developers and working with, mostly Frank has the luxury of working with the ones he wants to work with. But seeing,
you're good at your job, that's what you get, right?
You get to choose, and you also then get to be impactful on the project, where he's really putting forward what's better for the community and what's better for that area of town, literally, as how do customers approach it, and what amenities are there, and what does how does it sit in the context of where the street is and where people are.
It feels like he's more impactful, or he's as impactful as business owners.
Yes.
Right? Like small business owners who are creating the jobs and the environment that are our community. He's building the structures that we're using for our community. And politicians they come and go.
Well, they come and go, and they often
they come and
stand
go.
in the way.
Well, they
that.
either hold up policy
Yeah.
and say we can't do this
Yeah.
because of policy, or they're just sticks in the mud and they're in there for 3-4 years
Yeah.
because they've got an axe to grind or whatever, and it's not about the longevity of the future of our town.
Totally, and making sure that the decisions they're making have as little impact to the future city as possible,
Right.
where you're not making, building in rigidity that stops growth and development and enhancements.
Right.
Like if you have policy that restricts, green space and or parks, or then you've just got a brick city. And that's one of my personal criticisms of the downtown and how that whole Harris Green area has been developed, or the way it was developed is like developers promised, this and this and this, and then when it actually executed, it's like they close their gates. They're supposed to be breezeways through the property, and they're restricting light because they've relaxed the setbacks between the buildings because they won't let them go high, so they've got to go wide. So it's like, okay, we're hung up on this height thing,
Yeah.
but now because you can't go high, you got to go wide. There
We're on the
isn't a
tip of
space
an
for a
island.
park. I know.
How do you go wider on the tip of an island?
I know, and
You
these
have
are the
to go
things.
high.
Is like, okay, like why I get that we need, and we do, and it restricts how much housing stock we have and capacity, and it affects the cost and price. And we live in a place that everybody wants to live, so you can't really restrict the mobility of people in a free society, and nor would we want to. So why not just loosen certain things and just face the future head on, because whoever's fighting it, they'll lose the fight, because it's inevitable to happen, because every city throughout the history of cities have done the same thing.
Time marches
Time
on.
marches
and it just
on.
like it'll, yes.
And you can do there's definitely short-term things, and I think hopefully our council will focus on loosening some things that don't need public consultation. They've got some, base of good ideas to expand the housing stock with renovations, and which is more environmentally beneficial, less environmentally impactful than tearing down a house and rebuilding like a 4 or 6 plex, which is great. But there's 3 or 4 plexes that are already built that, are restricted based on parking requirements, and they're not able to be expanded based on, the age of when they were built. You can only do it if it's, 1984 is the cutoff, so you can't do it to houses older than that.
Okay.
So these are the kinds of things that they can actually do that would make real impactful. But we get caught up in the argument of missing middle that will take 30 to 40 years. So it's like caught in the middle of dealing with what will impact today with what the future would look like 40 years from now. And you have to be able to make both those decisions independent of each other, but also in collaboration, knowing that this one policy, regardless of what people say, is going to take 30 to 40 years to take shape. So if you don't do it today and you're going to delay it to 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5, it's inevitable to happen.
Yeah,
because
if you keep arguing about how it's going to happen, you're going to end up with a disjointed end product, because it's still going to happen.
So it's still going to eventually happen, but it's just going to be that much more painful. And more people will slip out of the realm and slip more into poverty and unhoused population, just because we can't build it fast enough. And we should have started building it 15, 20 years ago, but we didn't. And a lot of the local municipal zoning and, the OCPs and, official city plans that have been built have restricted it. And then also activism, right?
Well, those OCPs are like our business plans, which we're agreeing that every 3 to 4 years need to be revamped. So maybe that's something that every term or every new council needs to look at, but they don't, do they? They just continue it on, or do they look at
every project. So you've got, the official city planning, and then you've got the more targeted ones that are in like Cook Street Village, and these different pockets that have another plan that is about the execution. It's more the operational kind of thing. So all of that gets tied into what's allowed in the zoning, right? So there's some projects that are completely within the official city plan, the regional or the area specific plan, and to code, they get pushed back to staff because of some idealistic sort of idea of what the future is, but it literally is being delayed based on, you know, wishes and dreams of counselors versus what the city staff is proposing. We just let our city staff do the thing and the developers do their thing, and especially now, and I regret not having that point to Frank, is you now need architects, you need engineers, you need like electrical, all this stuff. Back in the day, you didn't need, if the project wasn't big, it didn't warrant all these professionals, you didn't need them. Now every project needs them. So you add this extra layer of cost, which also delays projects. And then once you do it and everything fits with it, you've hired these professionals to do the recommendations. They follow the official city plans. They've followed the permitting regulations and the variances, and they still take 2 to 3 years to come to fruition. That's a problem.
That really is
right?
a problem.
And that's where, you know, institution is taken over, and removing the execution of these things, which we need to greatly speed up, which I am going to be petitioning our local city council to just fast track the projects that don't need this nonsense. And then also make a few adjustments.
Sign your petition, you let me know.
Hopefully, I think we've got a good city council in. I think it's good. There's a good balance. And I think everybody needs to feel like the city council represents them, even if they, you know, based on the voting mix, doesn't necessarily get their agenda passed. At least the input is in there, right? The councillors that agree or think certain ways, they're there to voice their opinions. And, you know, as long as everybody has a voice at the table, I think that should satisfy most people.
I think that there is a gap between the private enterprise that's really driving good things in our town, like good developers, good architects, good foundations, doing good work, good businesses, building communities, and the politicians. And I think that perhaps if business owners could vote in the same town that they have a business, that would bridge that gap a little further. I know for myself, I feel like I can have an opinion on what happens in Victoria, where I have 3 or 4 businesses, yet I can't officially say anything. I have no vote. And I think
business licensing could be a way around that. And I mean, obviously the business or the building owners could vote. If you own property in the city, you can vote, even if you don't live in the city, which I think is a good thing. I recently moved I've been living in the city of Victoria I've been here 30 years now.
Oh, you're in Saanich now, aren't you?
I just moved just outside of the city of Victoria. Now I'm in Saanich. I still own property here. 90% of my business is done in the city of Victoria. So fortunately I can vote in the city of Victoria because I own land. Okay. So, but if I didn't own land, I wouldn't have a voice. And, obviously my staff, most of them live in the city of Victoria, by population numbers of my staff. And, I would love for them to vote. And I think encouraging more people to vote is always something. We had a very low turnout for voting, which is very disappointing, but it's historically low. If you look back the last 20 years, it's declined, I think, year over year, which...
Yeah, people get apathetic to the political system because it always feels
involved? Like if you're not informed, there's a lot of people that, and justifiably, they're raising families, they're doing their thing. I think back before I became more politically active and interested, how life was pretty simple and easy and not so, polarizing. But I do think everybody has a civic duty to vote. And, you don't need to know everything about everything, but just figure out who aligns with your values and then, and go and vote for them. If you want change and if you want your ideas to be heard and presented, and even if you just want to know that your voice is at the table, I think that to me is way underrated. You don't need a council made up of, your clones.
Right.
I think as a board, you need all the voices heard and then discussed. And if you're being true and authentic to that discussion, then you're going to take some ideas from everybody's platform and the better ideas should reach the top. And if you're measuring and monitoring, which is another key component to business planning, is measuring and monitoring the results of that plan, then you're going to be able to make adjustments and tweaks. Unless you get rigid and you're just like wanting to be a jerk and just, I'm not going to change my mind. But listen, I can change my mind like the wind.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm presented with new information. And I think that's where it doesn't make me not integral. It it actually should make me a little bit, more integral.
I think it gives you greater value as long as you don't do what I do and just go in guns blazing one day and say, I had an epiphany.
I do that every day, man.
I know. Okay.
But you surround yourself with people that shoot it down.
Exactly. Shoot it down, or at least scramble to make it happen for you.
But this is the point. Is if you're successful in those discussions, then the idea is as good as you thought that epiphany was, it'll actually be better through the process of breaking it down.
Yeah,
and being criticized. If your argument can't handle criticism, chances are it's a bad argument.
Absolutely.
And I think, there's political figures and ideas and concepts in Canada that can't pass the muster of scrutiny. And in the States, we know that firsthand. Like, if you do not have a policy that can stand up and withstand criticism, then you should be looking at that policy completely. And when you have a huge swath of the nation down south that just is looking to throw stones and just, anything but that, but not presenting ideas, don't tell me all the problems. Come with solutions.
Because everyone's going to come with problems.
Totally.
Every political spectrum is going to come with problems because that's the world we live in.
And even the best ideas may not pass the test of time. But doesn't mean it's not worth trying, and doesn't mean it's not worth going. And even if your more insane idea, maybe there's 20% of it or 10% of it that is actually really good, that can be mixed with these other ideas and make a really good policy. That is the same thing with business planning. That's why you bring it to your group. And most businesses should have a form of board of directors. And it doesn't need to be organized or paid, but people, and whether it's just, like the Bread and Butter Collective is like an effective board where we can kind of talk about some crazy ideas that we've had or different policies we're going to change, and then just get some other people's independent. They've got no skin in the game, no vested interest, but just, sharing the ideas and then poking holes in them. And then as a business owner or business leader of your organization, having the kind of wherewithal to recognize where you're down the wrong path and all the signs are telling you it's the wrong path, but yet you still march on. And then you're wondering how you got there. Well, you got so rigid in your position that you weren't willing to look, you could have pivoted in all those spots before if you're listening. Yeah. So I kind of sometimes do a lot of talking. And as I've aged, I've started listening more. And I'll sit with my team and just listen to their ideas, and not because if you are a strong personality, you can really mold and guide, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good for your business, even if it is your business. Like everybody's vision needs to be critiqued.
Yeah, and you need to poke holes in it, make sure it's everyone's vision that's shared.
It should be shared, and you can't manage by committee. Like at the end of the day, someone actually has to make the final decision, but it should try to involve as many points of view and perspective. And I really love the impact filter on decision making that you do in your business.
Thank you, Dan Sullivan.
Yes, and Dan Sullivan.
That's trademarked.
Yeah, but it's very good because I often talk out to the team and let them do. I mean, they're effectively running our business. We have business partners, but myself and Joe Zambri are the, sort of primary owners that are at that table, but we've got all of our other key leaders in our business there, and they're running with it. And all of the thing I ask them to do is look at the impact, of those decisions and what areas they affect so that we don't miss anything. And, the unintended outcomes of decisions is what often people trip over. So it's your idea is that you're doing something and this is going to be the result. There's always unintended consequences. Some are good, some are bad, some are disastrous, and some erode the culture of your business because it doesn't align with, you haven't properly consulted or listened to certain feedback. But if you're adaptable and amenable, every business plan needs to be like an organism. It just changes. It grows, adapts.
Morphs to the
environment it's in, and takes the inputs and then processes it. And that's where the impact filter of that kind of stuff is.
I just got a picture of a new science fiction movie we're gonna make. It's a cross between the Blob and the Alien, and, and the Wolves of Wall Street.
And yes, it's
just this blob, ever changing, taking
moving,
over Wall
morphing,
Street.
Incorporating things and being better.
Yeah,
not everything ends up better at the end, but you'll always be able to point out where it went wrong. I think that's where your business planning is where you can look back and go, okay, this was a mistake. Like that was a bad decision and made with good intention, but then look at the flaw of the process. Like,
how did that get missed?
Yeah.
Or how did it get accepted?
Exactly. Like we did this because you're always going to be able to look back and go, that was a mistake. But then if you don't properly analyze how that mistake was made and then really recognize what parts of that decision making created the mistake, then you're doomed to repeat yourself. And this is the world we're in, and we go back to the fourth turning, is literally history just repeats itself.
We're kind of doomed as humans to repeat our mistakes.
You always do.
Unless you learn from them, and the mistake is still a mistake. I mean, I think people are very, very sensitive. You can't say that you're making a mistake, but I think that a mistake is a mistake.
Oh, it's clear.
And they're usually bad, but we can certainly learn from them. And it's really bad. It's worse. A mistake is worse if you don't learn from it.
Well, you compound it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, kind of one of the sort of things we should leave our listeners to is like try not to compound your mistakes with bad mistakes, but you have to have that critical analysis.
You got to be able to go, okay, here's the mistakes we made.
And I'll admit that you're wrong.
You got to recognize them.
Yeah, and don't think of it as like, oh, I'm stupid or whatever. It's like everybody makes mistakes. And you always base your decisions on the information you have at the time. Mm-hmm. And the problem is you don't apply the hire slow, fire quick. Take a little longer in making the decision. Really put it through that filter. Understand the impacts as best you can. Implement the decision, and then measure and monitor the outcomes and the unintended outcomes.
And tweak and
not be afraid to pivot and say, okay, this was a mistake, and don't just double down on it. And I think that is.
And if you like what you hear today on this podcast, please join the Bread and Butter Collective.
Join the Bread and Butter Collective. We don't recruit. We had somebody sent us a message about, sell me on why I should be a member of Bread and Butter Collective.
Oh man, you've got to know why.
You got to know why.
Yeah.
Like if you read our website and you still have to ask that question, then chances are you're not ready. I don't want to say ready because it's not like.
Well, maybe you don't have enough questions that need answering yet.
Yeah, and maybe you don't need the help.
Yeah.
Like if you can't easily identify, then you probably are running a super successful business and you don't need the collective mind of the hive that we're, kind of building. Growing.
Yeah, but that's not to say that you're not welcome if you have a successful business.
Oh, 100%.
We want your
just be
input.
willing to share the information.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is. Let's just share and talk and help and grow. And thank you, all of our listeners.
Yeah,
I think all
thanks,
3
Mom.
or 4 of you, Mom and my dad's passed, but.
Well, thank you.
He would listen for sure.
I bet he would. He'd be.
And maybe he is listening somewhere.
I'm sure he is.
Yeah. But let's be kind, and we'll look forward to next season. We're gonna have even more conversations and guests, and talk about business issues and community building things, which I think can look at yourself and see how you can impact your community in a positive way. And that will also help you grow your business.
Yeah, always keep your eyes open. Look for ways to help. Look for ways to participate.
100%.
Don't
get your ideas
stop
out there.
participating.
And remember to be kind.
And nice.
I love it. Sam, thank you, sir.
Calen, successful completion of season 3. Thanks so much for everything you've done.
I love your partnership.
Me as well, man.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to our producers.
Oh, yeah. We couldn't do it without them. Well, we could
we
speak all day, but no
Aaron
one would ever
and Kyle
hear it.
are magnificent. And we couldn't do it without them. And we thank them for all their efforts. And
the sound effects that I'm sure they're putting in, splicing them in, all the bleeping and all the air horns. And thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Till next season.
Bread and Butter Collective's membership includes the following local businesses: 2% Jazz, 900 Degrees Wood-Fired Pizzeria, Agrius, Big Wheel Burger, Blue Mountain Solutions, Bodega Tapas Wine Bar, Brentwood Bay Village Emporium, Nourish and Charlotte the Quail, Victoria Chocolate and Company, Drum Roaster Coffee, Habit Coffee, Foo Asian Street Food, the Culinary Arts Program at Camosun, Cafe Fantastico, Fall Epi, Harold Street Brewworks, Hey Happy, House of Botang, Hoyne Brewing, Jenny Marie's Cracker Company, La Pasta, La Rue Patisserie, Mocha House, Part and Parcel, Poco a Pinto Bar, Pizzeria Prima Strada, Rain Dogs, Roast, Table 9 Consulting, Sherwood Cafe and Bar, Sweets by Selena, The Collective Wine Bar and Kitchen, The Drake, Tapa Bar, Taco Stand Al Pastor, Toque, The Whole Beast, The Wienery, and Zambries.
To hear more from the Bread and Butter Collective, go to checknews.ca/podcasts on Check Plus, or find us on your favorite podcasting platform.